First of all today, the husband of the British Iranian woman, Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe, has said the government hasn't done all it could have done to secure the release of his wife. She was arrested during a visit to Iran in April 2016, accused of trying to overthrow the regime. She says she was simply on holiday visiting relatives. Last week, the Foreign Secretary, Boris Johnson, was accused of worsening Mrs Zaghari-Ratcliffe's plight by saying that she was teaching journalists in the country, a claim that's been seized upon by some in Iran as proof of her guilt. And yesterday, Boris Johnson's cabinet colleague, Michael Gove, appeared to add to the uncertainty about what Mrs Zaghari-Ratcliffe was doing there.
I don't know. One of the things I want to stress is that there is no reason why Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe should be in prison in Iran, so far as any of us know. No evidence has been produced which suggests that she should be detained. We know that the Iranian regime is capable of abusing the human rights of its own citizens. It appears here to be harming the human rights of someone who, whose plight necessarily moves us all.
But you say that you don't know what she was doing. Her husband is very clear that she was there on holiday with her child.
Well, in that case, I take exactly her husband's assurance in that regard.
And responding to Michael Gove's comments, Nazanin's husband, Richard Ratcliffe, has written to the Foreign Office to remind all cabinet ministers that the government position is that the UK government has no doubt that Nazanin was in Iran on holiday. Mr Ratcliffe spoke to the BBC this morning.
I wrote yesterday, in fact, after we saw, and I didn't catch it live, the comments, but obviously my cousins did and they got very upset and then watched it through and thought, yeah, no, actually, I mean, don't get me wrong, he said some good things about Iran, but it's important that the government is really clear on this point, that Nazanin was just on holiday and she's innocent, and it shouldn't be from cabinet ministers to be you know, fudging it. So I wrote to the Foreign Office an email, in fact, setting out that you know, the government's position was clear in Parliament, that the UK government has no doubt that she was there on holiday, and if they could please make sure that all the cabinet ministers are aware of it.
Well, that was Richard Ratcliffe. The Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson was asked again about the situation in Brussels this morning.
Let me just say on Iran and consular cases generally, they are all very sensitive, and I think the key thing to understand is that we're working very, very hard and intensively and impartially on all those cases. Thank you very much. Thank you. See you later. Thank you.
Boris Johnson there. Nicky Morgan, his comments about the fact that Nazanin was teaching journalists in Iran, which is what he said, first of all, may have worsened her situation in the country in which she's being held. Your colleague Anna Soubry has called for him to be sacked. Do you agree with her?
I certainly think that he should be considering his position, yes. If I thought that sacking was going to make a difference, I mean, the important point is the safety and security of Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe. It's a heartbreaking situation. She is separated from her young daughter. Her husband is doing all he can here. I cannot begin to imagine what went through Boris Johnson and, I'm afraid to say, Michael Gove's minds. You know, we all know, particularly after a week of coverage, that she was in the country visiting her parents with her young daughter. That's it, end of story. And Michael was right, though, to say that, of course, there is no justification whatsoever for the Iranian authorities to be holding her.
How irresponsible was it, then, of Boris Johnson, if it is true that he just hadn't read the briefs properly?
If that is true, and that's a big if, I don't know, I haven't talked to Boris directly, that is completely inexcusable. Look, I've been a Secretary of State, I haven't been anything like a Foreign Secretary, where somebody's security is at risk in the way that in this case. But frankly, there are times when being a Secretary of State it's not glamorous, it involves reading large boxes of papers for hours every weekend and every night, but that is the job. That is the job that you are asked to do on behalf of your country. If he doesn't want to do it, then somebody else should be given the job.
Listening to him there in Brussels this morning, saying that the case needs to be handled sensitively and impartially, what does he mean?
I have no idea. I just don't understand why he isn't... I don't know what advice he is getting that says this morning would have been a perfect opportunity for him to say, I've heard the comments of Nazanin's husband, I am very sorry for what I said, I got it wrong, and the situation is very clear. We're doing all we can as a government to put pressure on the Iranian authorities. We will use everything we've got at our disposal to get her out of that prison in as short a time as possible.
Is he the right man to actually handle this case sensitively in the way he has expressed and actually secure Nazanin's release?
Well, that's what the concern, and that's obviously, you know, the conduct that he has shown, the way he's answered the original question, the way he's continued it, would make, I would have thought, any Prime Minister think, do I have the right person as Foreign Secretary? Because sadly, this is only one of a number of cases where there are British nationals detained around the world, but obviously Iran is a particularly difficult area of the world to deal with.
Richard Ratcliffe told the BBC today that he didn't want Boris Johnson to be sacked because he could do more good by actually now trying to get his wife released. Many Labour politicians have called for him to be sacked. Jeremy Corbyn, Tulip Sadiq and Sadiq Khan. But the Shadow Brexit Secretary Keir Starmer told the Today programme today that while Boris should have been fired a while ago, we should all reflect on what Richard is saying this morning. Do you think it'd be better for him to stay to see this through?
I think Keir's right on that. But for Boris to say this morning that this case needs to be handled delicately seems almost a contradiction in terms given his character. I think the role that he's played in Michael Gove has been appalling. The idea that you can shout off as Foreign Secretary, as Nicky said, without really learning your brief, and then for other cabinet ministers to come in and put their foot in your big mouth. Why didn't Michael Gove say, this is not my department? The government's line is quite clear. I have nothing to say on Boris Johnson's comments. This person is innocent. She was there on holiday, but we all know this is an evil regime that will use, they won't let her go, but they will use this maybe to increase her sentence. And I think that is shameful. And both of them, both Michael Gove and Boris Johnson, should hang their heads in shame for the role that they've played in this.
Richard Ratcliffe has said that actually he thinks he should stay. They've spoken, and he obviously feels that perhaps it is his best chance to get his wife released. But why do you think, I know you are not in the mind of Michael Gove, what would be the motivation for saying that he didn't know what she was doing there, bearing in mind there's been so much publicity around it and the government has clarified the position that she was there on holiday? Do they know something we don't?
Well, look, possibly. And we missed I didn't see the clip live yesterday morning, so I don't know whether there was something before. And I mean, as I said earlier on, I don't know what was going through the minds of Michael and Boris when they said what they said. And I think it is right to listen, of course, to Nazanin's husband. He is absolutely up close. He is suffering the agonies of his wife and his daughter not being here. It must be dominating every single second of his life. If that's what he thinks, then OK. But I would say that people have got to be very mindful of everything they say in a case like this.
Right. I mean, Michael Gove in that interview yesterday was backing up Boris Johnson's position and saying it was very much the Iranian authorities' fault that...
Which is right.
Of course it is.
But is this about Michael Gove protecting his Brexiteer colleague in Cabinet?
I don't know if it's about that. And undoubtedly, when you are on any kind of sofa and you're in the Cabinet, you are there to stand up and to defend your Cabinet colleagues on the basis of collective responsibility and supporting each other. But I think Frank has provided a perfect script that Michael could have used. And perhaps he'll ask you next time, Frank, for advice before he goes on the Mar programme.
All right.
But what is actually so worrying about this, isn't it, is that if he was going in to defend his colleague, God help what's going to happen when Boris Johnson's enemies set on him. It's opened the whole issue again, which was beginning to die down, if it could die down. But I agree with both, I mean, what's been the theme of this? I mean, the real culprit is Iran. They're an evil regime. We ought to bear that in mind. But we don't go around making it easy for them to be nasty to British citizens, for goodness sake.